delivering a verdict that forever changed Michael Carter's life. Guilty. A decorated officer with 15 years of service, Michael sat handcuffed, his eyes fixed on the floor. Despite his repeated claims of innocence, the jury had ruled against him. He was certain the evidence had been planted, enough to seal his fate. Yet, what weighed most heavily on his heart wasn't the sentence. It was the thought of leaving Luke, his loyal K-9 partner, behind. Luke sat at the back of the courtroom, his sharp eyes never leaving Michael. More than just a partner, the German Shepherd had been Michael's constant companion through countless life-or-death situations. Now, as Michael faced the lowest point of his life, the thought of never seeing Luke again was unbearable. When the judge rose to leave, Michael's voice broke the heavy silence. "Your Honor," he called, his voice trembling. "Before I'm taken away, I have one last request. Please, let me say goodbye to Luke." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge paused, his eyes studying Michael for a long moment before he finally nodded. 3 minutes, he said, his tone firm but laced with sympathy. The moment Luke was released, he bolted toward Michael, his claws echoing loudly on the polished floor. Michael dropped to his knees, pulling Luke into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, buddy," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I let you down. I won't be there anymore." Luke whimpered softly, nuzzling into Michael's chest. Then suddenly his body stiffened. His nose worked furiously against Michael's jacket, tugging at the fabric and barking sharply. The unexpected sound shattered the stillness of the courtroom, drawing all eyes toward them. "What's that dog doing?" the judge asked, his brow furrowed. Luke pulled harder, his sharp barks echoing. One of the officers cautiously stepped forward, checking Michael's jacket. The tension in the room grew suffocating. Then, with a metallic clink, something small fell to the floor, a recording device. The prosecutor's face turned pale as he stepped forward, his voice unsteady. This doesn't prove anything," he snapped, trying to regain control of the moment. But Luke barked again, his stance firm and unyielding. The truth was undeniable. Whatever was on that device mattered. Michael stared at the tiny recorder, his heart pounding. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope emerged. Could this be the evidence he had desperately needed? Did you feel the unbreakable bond between Michael and Luke? Imagine what lies ahead in this gripping, emotional journey. If you want to uncover the secrets on that recorder and see how it could change everything, hit the like button and subscribe. The next thrilling chapter is just getting started. Just before opening the kennel door, Sarah hesitated for a moment. "All right, boy," she said, grabbing Luke's leash firmly. "Let's see if you're trying to tell us something." She led Luke to Michael's locker in the department's storage room. The dog wasted no time, immediately sniffing and pawing at the lower compartment. Sarah's heart began to race as she unlocked and opened the locker door. Beneath a few neatly folded uniforms lay a small, unmarked envelope. Her hands shook as she pulled it out and carefully opened it. Inside were grainy but damning photographs, images of Captain Harding meeting with a known criminal. Behind the photos was a document outlining suspicious transactions that directly implicated Harding in a bribery scheme tied to the case that had landed Michael in jail. Sarah stared at the evidence, her chest tightening. "Luke," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "you just found the smoking gun." Fully understanding the weight of what she held, Sarah wasted no time contacting the judge's office. Combined with the recording Luke had unearthed in the courtroom, these photos and documents painted a damning picture of Harding's guilt. But deep down, Sarah knew this was far from over. If Harding had orchestrated such a setup, it was highly unlikely he had acted alone. Luke sat steadfastly beside her, his unwavering presence anchoring her amidst the chaos of her thoughts. "Michael was right," she said softly, gently scratching behind Luke's ears. "You really are the best partner anyone could ask for." Sitting in the evidence room, Sarah spread the incriminating photographs across the desk. The magnitude of what Luke had helped uncover weighed heavily on her chest. Captain Harding wasn't just corrupt, he was part of something far more extensive. The documents revealed connections to other high-ranking officials, unexplained payments, and a deeply unsettling trail of manipulation that extended well beyond Michael's case. She glanced down at Luke, who remained alert by her side, his intense gaze seeming to sense her unease. "This isn't just about Michael," she muttered, her voice almost a whisper. "This goes much deeper." Grasping the gravity of the situation, Sarah made a direct call to the judge. Within an hour, the evidence she had uncovered was in his hands. As he reviewed the photographs and documents, his expression darkened. "This is far worse than I expected," he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. If these documents are legitimate, Michael Carter isn't just innocent. He's the victim of a department-wide cover-up. The precinct was abuzz with tension as whispers spread through the hallways. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, their nerves fraying under the weight of growing suspicions. Several who had testified against Michael began to shift uncomfortably, realizing their involvement might soon come under scrutiny. Back in his cell, Michael was called out unexpectedly. The commotion in the jail's holding area made his pulse quicken. He was escorted to a secure room where Sarah and the judge awaited him. As soon as he saw the folder of evidence on the table and Luke sitting proudly at Sarah's side, his heart swelled with a mix of hope and disbelief. "This just came in," the judge said, sliding the documents toward Michael. "It proves Harding's corruption and, most importantly, that the evidence used to convict you was fabricated." Michael's hands trembled as he flipped through the papers, photos, records, and even notes detailing how Harding had orchestrated the case against him. It was all there. His voice cracked as he asked, "Does this mean?" The judge nodded firmly. "It means you're going free. But this isn't over. There are more people involved, and we'll need your help to expose them." Michael knelt down, pulling Luke into a tight embrace. "You saved me, boy," he whispered. "You saved me again." Luke wagged his tail, and the palpable relief in the room was undeniable. But Michael knew this was just the beginning. Whoever had orchestrated this conspiracy went deeper than Harding. There were more layers to uncover, and Michael wouldn't rest until the entire truth came to light. Stepping out of the courthouse as a free man, Michael felt the weight of what lay ahead, far heavier than the chains he had just shed. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions about his release, the reopened case, and the corruption scandal brewing in the department. Michael ignored them, his focus fixed on Luke trotting faithfully at his side. The sight of his loyal K-9 partner brought a flicker of hope amid the chaos. Inside the courthouse, the judge had convened a special task force to investigate the widening web of corruption. Sarah, now an integral part of the team, was leading the charge. The evidence Luke had helped uncover pointed to a sprawling network of bribery and evidence tampering that involved multiple officers and even external players. Captain Harding was just the tip of the iceberg. "Michael," Sarah called, catching up to him outside the courthouse. "We need your help. No one knows this department better than you." Michael hesitated, his jaw tightening. He had spent his entire career trusting the badge, believing in the integrity of the system. Now, that trust was shattered. But when he looked down at Luke, the dog's calm, determined eyes reminded him why he'd joined the force in the first place. "I'm in," he said finally, his voice resolute. "But I'm not doing this for the department. I'm doing it for the truth, and for every officer still fighting for what's right." The investigation began in earnest. Sarah and Michael worked tirelessly, piecing together timelines, cross-referencing cases, and interviewing officers who had worked closely with Harding. While some cooperated, others stonewalled, their silence raising further suspicion. Luke proved invaluable, sniffing out hidden files and uncovering overlooked evidence during searches of Harding's office and locker. One night, while sifting through a pile of old case files, Sarah discovered a list of names, officers, local politicians, and known criminals, linked to suspicious payments and unsolved crimes. "This isn't just about Michael's case," Sarah said, her voice heavy with concern. "This is an entire network of people who've used their power to cover up crimes and destroy anyone who stood in their way." Michael glanced up from the file he was studying. "If we push this any further, we're going to make some dangerous enemies." Sarah nodded solemnly. "We've already made them," Michael replied. "But I'm not stopping. Not until the whole truth comes out." Luke let out a soft bark, as if in agreement. Michael reached down to scratch him behind the ears, his resolve hardening. They weren't just fighting for justice anymore. They were fighting for everyone who had been silenced, betrayed, or framed. Anger laced Michael's voice as he muttered, "They ruined good officers' lives to cover this up." He and Sarah continued sifting through the files, their determination unwavering despite the mounting danger. Michael's phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the tense silence. The message was from an anonymous number. "You're digging too deep. Stop or you'll regret it." He stared at the screen for a long moment, the words sending a chill down his spine. Handing the phone to Sarah, he saw her expression darken. Her face turned pale, but her resolve remained firm. "They're scared," she said quietly. "That means we're getting close." Michael glanced at Luke, who sat calmly at his side, alert and ready. "Let them come," he said with a steady voice. "We're not stopping now." As they continued working, Michael's eyes narrowed on a document Sarah pointed out. "Look at this," she said, sliding the paper toward him. "Every major bribe and erased report ties back to one name, AR." Michael's jaw tightened as he stared at the initials. "They've stayed hidden this long, but if we find them, this whole operation crumbles." Suddenly, Luke stood up, his body tense and ears flicking forward. A low growl escaped his throat, making Michael's heart skip. "What is it, boy?" he asked. Before Sarah could answer, the lights in the conference room flickered and then went out completely, plunging them into darkness. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her weapon. "That's not a power outage," she whispered. A loud crash of breaking glass shattered the silence, followed by the sound of deliberate footsteps outside the door. Michael motioned for Sarah to take cover as adrenaline surged through him. "We're not alone," he whispered. Luke crouched low, his growl deepening as his sharp eyes locked on the doorway. The footsteps grew louder, inching closer. Whoever had sent the text wasn't bluffing. They were here to stop the investigation. The door creaked open, and Luke sprang into action. A shadowed figure stepped into the room, weapon drawn, but Luke lunged with incredible speed, clamping his jaws onto the intruder's arm. The man screamed, dropping his weapon as he struggled to shake Luke off. Michael acted fast, kicking the weapon away and aiming his gun at a second figure rushing in. "Don't move," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The second intruder froze, hands raised, though their tense posture signaled they were waiting for an opening. Behind Michael, Sarah called for backup over her radio, her voice steady but urgent. Luke held firm, growling as the first man panicked. "Call him off," the intruder yelled. Michael stepped closer, his weapon trained. "Call them off first," he ordered, motioning toward the footsteps echoing in the hall. But before the man could respond, the air filled with the deafening hiss of tear gas canisters. Acrid smoke began to engulf the room, stinging their eyes and throats. "We're out of time," Sarah yelled, grabbing the files they'd been working on. "We need to move." Michael whistled sharply, and Luke released his grip, retreating to his side. The team moved quickly, ducking low to avoid the gas as they pushed toward the emergency exit. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets pinging off walls and furniture. Covering Sarah and Luke, Michael returned fire to slow their pursuers. Bursting through the exit, they found themselves in a dark alley. Sarah clutched the files to her chest, gasping for air. "We can't go back to the precinct," she said between breaths. "They've compromised everything. They'll be waiting for us." Michael nodded, his mind racing. Whoever AR was, they were playing for keeps. Looking at Luke, standing steadfast at his side, Michael felt a surge of resolve. "Then we finish this on our terms," he said. "We're not running anymore." The safe house was eerily quiet. Michael, Sarah, and Luke had retreated to a secluded cabin deep in the woods, their last refuge. Spread across the wooden table were the files Sarah had managed to save. They contained everything needed to expose the corrupt network. Transaction records, names, and ties to AR, the shadowy figure behind it all. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the documents. "This is it," she said. "If we can get this to the press or federal investigators, they won't be able to cover it up. The entire operation will collapse." Michael nodded, though his focus remained on the window, scanning the tree-line. He knew it wasn't over. Whoever had attacked them wouldn't stop until they were silenced. Suddenly, Luke's ears perked, and he let out a low growl, his body tensing. Michael froze, reaching for his weapon. "They found us," he whispered. "How?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "It doesn't matter," Michael replied. "They're here." The first shot shattered the stillness, breaking through the cabin's window. Glass sprayed across the room as Michael shoved Sarah behind the table for cover. Luke barked furiously, standing his ground at Michael's side. More shots rang out, signaling the attacker's approach. Michael took a deep breath, adrenaline surging. "Stay down," he told Sarah. "Luke and I will hold them off." Moving in sync, Michael and Luke defended the cabin. Michael fired, taking down one intruder, while Luke lunged at another, his powerful jaws bringing the man to the ground. But the attackers kept coming. Sarah crawled toward the files, stuffing the most critical documents into a bag. "Michael," she shouted, "we need to get these out of here. Now." Michael nodded grimly. "Go. Luke and I will cover you." After a brief hesitation, Sarah slipped out the back door, disappearing into the darkness with the evidence. Michael and Luke continued to hold their ground, pushing back the attackers with every ounce of strength they had. Just as the last intruder fell, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Backup had finally arrived. Days later, the story broke nationwide. Sarah had delivered the files to a trusted journalist, and the resulting exposé brought the corrupt network crashing down. Arrests were made at every level, including AR, revealed to be a powerful local politician who had used the police department as his personal enforcers. Michael was hailed as a hero, though he brushed off the attention. Standing on the porch of his home, he watched Luke play in the yard. The loyal dog had saved him more times than he could count, and their bond was now unbreakable. "We did it, boy," Michael said softly, kneeling to scratch behind Luke's ears. "It's over." Luke wagged his tail, leaning into Michael's touch, his sharp eyes calm for the first time in weeks. For Michael, it wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something new. They had fought for justice, not just for themselves, but for those who had been silenced and betrayed. As he watched Luke chase a ball in the golden light of the setting sun, Michael knew they had earned this moment of peace.